Old Hollywood celebrities who had deformities and disabilities. They dazzled on silver screens across America, embodying perfection and glamour. Yet behind the spotlight lurked a secret Hollywood desperately tried to hide. Many of its biggest stars lived with physical differences that would have shocked audiences. Some were born with them, others acquired them through accidents or illness, but all paid a devastating price to maintain the illusion of flawlessness demanded by studios who saw imperfection as box office poison. Today, we pull back the curtain on the painful reality these beloved icons endured when cameras stopped rolling. But here's what will truly shock you. The studios didn't just hide these conditions, they weaponized them. Many stars endured torturous treatments that today would be considered medical abuse. Some were subjected to experimental procedures without full consent. Others were forced to perform despite excruciating pain, their suffering dismissed as artistic temperament when they dared complain. Most disturbing of all, the same publicity departments that concealed these conditions often exploited them privately, using a star's desperation to hide their disability as leverage to control every aspect of their lives. The real story isn't just that these celebrities had physical differences, it's that their vulnerability became another asset for studios to manipulate, creating a prison of secrecy from which many never escaped. Before we dive deeper, here are 5 shocking facts that reveal the brutal reality behind Hollywood's facade of perfection. MGM maintained a dedicated correction department focused solely on fixing physical flaws in contract players. At least 6 major studios had physicians on retainer who performed unregulated cosmetic procedures on studio lots. Judy Garland's iconic ruby slippers had orthopedic inserts to correct her leg length discrepancy, never acknowledged publicly. Howard Hughes developed special bras with hidden structural supports for actresses with spinal issues. Contract stars underwent mandatory quarterly physical assessments, where even minor differences could lead to suspension without pay until corrected. Now, let's explore the most stunning cases that Hollywood never wanted you to see. Number 1, Rita Hayworth, the shocking transformation. Columbia Pictures didn't just discover Rita Hayworth, they literally created her through painful procedures that erased her ethnic identity. When studio head Harry Cohn first saw Margarita Cancino, he declared her unmarketable with her Spanish features and low hairline. What followed was Hollywood's most extreme makeover, one performed without anesthesia. Week after week for over a year, she sat with a towel clenched between her teeth as electric needles burned her scalp inch by inch, rewriting her heritage one hair follicle at a time. The electrolysis raised her hairline by over an inch, erasing the feature considered too ethnic for American audiences. Blood often soaked through her blouses during these sessions. She never spoke of the pain publicly. "When I go to bed, I wait for the scabs to heal before I can sleep on that side," she confided to a makeup artist who noticed her wincing during touch-ups. Beyond the visible changes, Hayworth suffered from uneven legs of different lengths. Every glamorous high heel you've seen her wear contained hidden orthopedic modifications. Her left shoe built up nearly an inch higher than her right. Dance sequences that looked effortless required her to perform through searing hip pain as her body compensated for the imbalance. The psychological toll was even greater than the physical one. Studio handlers conditioned her to deny her own heritage, coaching her to respond with confusion if anyone asked about her Spanish background. "They made me ashamed of who I was," she later told her daughter. "They said no one would desire a Spanish girl." The ultimate irony? After transforming herself through agonizing procedures to become America's dream girl, Hayworth discovered that escaping her manufactured image was impossible. "Men go to bed with Gila," she famously lamented, "but wake up with me." Number 2, Lon Chaney Sr., the self-inflicted tormentor. The man of 1,000 faces achieved his transformations through self-imposed torture that permanently damaged his body. Born to deaf parents, Chaney's extraordinary facial control came from communicating in sign language from infancy. But his most extreme transformations went far beyond expressive skill. They involved brutal physical distortion that shocked even hardened film crews. For The Hunchback of Notre Dame, Chaney didn't just wear a hump, he created a 70-pound concrete and metal apparatus that crushed his torso and internal organs. The pain was so severe that he could only wear it for 10 minutes at a time before assistants had to help remove it so he could breathe. His spine never fully recovered. "I found him vomiting blood between takes," recalled director Wallace Worsley. When I suggested using a lighter material, he refused. Quasimodo suffered, he told me. I must suffer too. For The Phantom of the Opera, Chaney inserted thin wires directly into his nostrils to pull them upward and outward. He placed painful hooks inside his mouth to pull his cheeks back and expose his teeth. He outlined his eye sockets with black paint containing chemicals that burned his skin to achieve the sunken appearance. The result, temporary blindness after many shooting days. Most shocking was his transformation for London After Midnight, where he inserted sharpened wires around his gum line to create the vampire's fanged grin. The puncture wounds became infected, leading to blood poisoning that hospitalized him for 2 weeks, a fact the studio attributed to exhaustion. The physical toll eventually claimed Chaney's life. The cumulative damage to his immune system from these transformations left him vulnerable to the pneumonia that killed him at 47. His final words reportedly acknowledged the bargain he'd made. I've created monsters. Now they've created me. Number 3. Clark Gable, the King's excruciating secret. Hollywood's ultimate leading man lived in constant pain that would have destroyed his virile image had audiences known the truth. The famous Gable smile that made women swoon. Completely artificial. By age 32, severe periodontal disease had ravaged Gable's mouth, requiring full extraction of his teeth. The ill-fitting dentures he received caused persistent ulcers and infections that required daily medication to control the pain. Kissing him was like pressing your lips against a hot stove, Vivien Leigh confided to her diary during Gone with the Wind filming. The fever from his infected gums radiated through those fake teeth. The dentures created a subtle whistle during dialogue that sound technicians worked tirelessly to eliminate. More devastating was the chronic halitosis that made intimate scenes a nightmare for his co-stars. Joan Crawford developed a technique of dabbing peppermint oil inside her nostrils before romantic scenes, a trick she privately shared with other actresses forced to kiss Gable. Director Victor Fleming invented the practice of close-up switching during Gone with the Wind, where Gable's romantic close-ups were often filmed with a stand-in wearing identical clothing seen only from behind. This technique, later common in Hollywood, was created specifically to minimize Gable's time wearing his painful dentures during intimate scenes. The psychological impact crushed Gable's confidence despite his public bravado. He avoided eating in restaurants and developed the habit of covering his mouth when he laughed, a gesture often misinterpreted as modesty, but actually concealing his fear that his dentures might shift visibly. The cruelest irony, his fifth wife, Kay Williams, later revealed, was that the man known for making women melt with his smile spent every night soaking his teeth in a glass, terrified someone might see. At least 3 Best Actress winners from the 1930 to 1960 era had visible physical differences airbrushed out of every official studio photograph. Contract players with disabilities often had body doubles who would film scenes showing the affected body part. One major studio commissioned a completely prosthetic leg for a leading lady that cost more than most American homes of the era. Several stars with speech impediments had dedicated vocal coaches who stood just off camera during every take. A famous Western actor had a specially designed saddle to accommodate a spinal deformity, now displayed in a Hollywood museum with no mention of its true purpose. Number 4. James Dean, rebel with a hidden struggle. The epitome of cool detachment was actually battling sensory impairments that shaped his iconic acting style. Dean's famous squint wasn't attitude, it was necessity. Severely myopic since childhood, Dean could barely see beyond a few feet. Without thick glasses, he was forbidden to wear on camera. During Rebel Without a Cause, director Nicholas Ray realized Dean couldn't see his marks on the floor and developed a system where crew members would physically position him before each take. He was essentially performing blind, Ray later admitted. That vulnerable quality everyone responded to? Part of it was genuine disorientation, as he tried to make out the blurry shapes around him. More significant was Dean's partial hearing loss that made conventional direction nearly impossible. Unable to clearly hear cues on noisy sets, Dean developed his distinctive delayed reaction timing. What appeared to be artistic choice was actually him taking an extra moment to process what he'd heard. This communication barrier fueled his reputation for being difficult. When Dean asked for repeated direction or seemed to ignore instructions, studios attributed it to his method intensity rather than acknowledge his impairment. Frustrated by constantly missing important context, Dean retreated into isolation between scenes, reinforcing his loner image. The emotional toll was devastating. Dean confided to friend Dennis Hopper, "Everyone thinks I'm being difficult when I'm just trying to understand what's happening. I'm always a beat behind everyone else, always catching up." His famous line from Rebel Without a Cause, "I'm involved now," carried personal significance beyond the script. It expressed his constant struggle to remain connected in a world where sensory barriers left him perpetually disconnected despite his desperate desire to belong. The studio system that profited from his alienated image actively prevented him from addressing the very conditions that created it, a cruel exploitation that ended only with his death at 24. Number 5. Merle Oberon, Double Life, Double Pain. Hollywood's exotic beauty endured both physical disfigurement and racial erasure through one of filmmaking's most elaborate cover-ups. The 1937 car accident that nearly ended Oberon's career left half her face paralyzed and deeply scarred. The truth was far worse than publicized. The impact had shattered her cheekbone and severed facial nerves, leaving her unable to control muscles on the left side of her face. Her husband, cinematographer Lucien Ballard, didn't just create special lighting to help, he invented an entirely new technology. The Obi light mounted directly on cameras to cast shadowless illumination that concealed her damaged features. This innovation, still used in filmmaking today, was never acknowledged as an accommodation for disability, but presented as merely a flattering technique. She couldn't feel when she was drooling on that side, her makeup artist later revealed. Between every take, someone had to quickly dab her face without the crew noticing. She lived in terror of the camera capturing her facial drooping. But Oberon's scarring concealed an even more closely guarded secret, her mixed-race heritage. Born in India to an Anglo-Indian mother, Oberon's success depended on hiding her true ethnicity in an era when leading ladies were exclusively white. Every morning began with layers of whitening makeup to lighten her naturally brown skin. The chemicals caused painful rashes and progressive skin damage. The psychological torment of this double deception nearly broke her. During filming of Wuthering Heights, she suffered a nervous breakdown after director William Wyler demanded brighter lighting that would have revealed both her scarring and her actual skin tone. Production halted for 3 days, while studios invented a story about exhaustion. The ultimate tragedy came when visiting her birthplace. Arriving in Bombay for a film, Oberon was confronted by relatives eager to reconnect with their famous family member. She denied knowing them, standing by her fabricated Tasmanian origins even as tears streamed down her face. The trauma of publicly rejecting her own blood haunted her until her death. "I don't know who I am anymore," she confessed to her final husband. "The face in my mirror isn't mine, and neither is the history they've given me." Number 6. Jean Tierney, Beauty Blinded. Hollywood's perfect face masked sensory challenges that made her every performance a triumph over invisible disability. Tierney's severe color blindness wasn't just an inconvenience. It fundamentally altered how she experienced her world. Unable to distinguish red from green, she navigated film sets like minefields of potential embarrassment. Costume fittings became exercises in humiliation as designers discussed color palettes she couldn't comprehend. "I learned to recognize fabrics by touch and to memorize which costumes were which colors," she later wrote. "I lived in terror of someone asking me how I liked the red dress when I couldn't tell if it was red or green. This invisible disability created constant anxiety." During the filming of Leave Her to Heaven, Tierney's character needed to identify a specific red boat in a harbor scene. Unable to distinguish it from the others, she memorized its position beforehand, only to find the props department had rearranged the boats. The resulting confusion led to a humiliating dressing down from the director before a crew member finally realized the issue and discreetly helped her. Her mental health struggles, severe depression, and bipolar disorder created an additional layer of disability that studios exploited rather than accommodated. When mood episodes interfered with filming, studios administered vitamin injections that were actually unregulated cocktails of amphetamines and barbiturates to force her to perform. These unregulated medications triggered the breakdown that led to her institutionalization and subsequent electroconvulsive therapy, treatments that damaged her memory and created yet another disability she had to overcome. When she returned to acting, she couldn't memorize dialogue, requiring cue cards for even short scenes. "The studio physicians who administered those vitamins knew what they were doing to me," she later told her daughter. "They were burning the candle at both ends, knowing I'd eventually break, but calculating how many films they could extract before that happened." The beautiful face that launched her career became a prison when it remained unchanged while her mind deteriorated, creating the cruel expectation determination that the perfect exterior should contain an equally perfect interior. Number 7. Harold Lloyd, the partial hand behind the stunts. The man who dangled from skyscraper clocks was hiding an injury that made his death-defying stunts even more miraculous. When a prop bomb exploded in Lloyd's hand in 1919, it blew off his thumb and index finger and nearly ended his career. The injury was far more severe than publicly acknowledged. Beyond the missing digits, the explosion had severely damaged nerves throughout his right hand, leaving him with limited sensation and dexterity in his remaining fingers. Lloyd's solution? A custom-made prosthetic glove that concealed his missing digits while appearing natural on camera. What audiences never knew, this prosthetic severely limited his grip strength, making his famous building climbing stunts in films like Safety Last exponentially more dangerous than they appeared. Each handhold was agony and terror combined, his stunt coordinator later revealed. He had essentially 3 functioning fingers to support his entire body weight. One slip, and he would have fallen to his death. The psychological impact ran deeper than physical limitation. Lloyd became obsessed with proving his capability despite his disability, pushing himself to perform increasingly dangerous stunts, specifically because executives had suggested he couldn't manage them with his injury. During filming of his clock-hanging sequence, Lloyd refused safety measures that wouldn't be visible on camera. With limited grip strength in his damaged hand, he clung to the minute hand with his full body weight exposed to a potential fatal fall. The shot that defined his career was also his most defiant statement about his disability. The studio wanted to retire me to directing after the accident, Lloyd confided to a colleague. Every time I dangle from a building, I'm showing them and myself that I'm not diminished. I'd rather fall to my death than be shelved because of my hand. The prosthetic glove itself became a source of physical suffering. Made of restrictive materials that didn't breathe, it caused painful skin infections and restricted circulation during long shooting days. Yet removing it was unthinkable. His contract specifically forbade being photographed without it, with substantial financial penalties for exposing his disability. Lloyd's determination to conceal his injury extended beyond professional pride. It was economic survival. Insurance companies refused to cover performers with known disabilities, making the revelation of his missing fingers potentially career-ending in an era before disability protection laws. One beloved musical star had a specially designed camera dolly that could follow her while hiding her leg brace. A famous swashbuckling actor performed most stunts left-handed after a right shoulder deformity was surgically concealed but remained painful. Studio contracts from the 1930s to 50s included clauses allowing immediate termination if a physical defect becomes visible to the public. At least 2 major actresses had special dialogue coaches, not because of accents, but to help with speech impediments. One leading man had all his dialogue re-recorded by another actor due to an uncontrollable stutter, a fact kept secret for 50 years. Number 8. Bela Lugosi, Dracula's Real Pain. The definitive Count Dracula performed through physical agony that shaped his iconic portrayal. Lugosi's famous stiff-legged vampire walk wasn't an artistic choice. It was the only way he could walk without collapsing in pain. Severe sciatica from World War I injuries left him with nerve damage that made normal movement excruciating. Each scene was performed through waves of pain that required increasing doses of morphine to control. Between takes, he would grip the set furniture until his knuckles turned white, recalled a crew member from Dracula. The moment the director called cut, assistants would rush in with his cane and medication. Then he'd compose himself and transform back into the untouchable Dracula when cameras rolled again. His thick, Hungarian accent, which became his trademark in lines like, "I never drink wine," masked a more significant speech challenge. Lugosi had suffered a traumatic brain injury during the war that affected his language processing. His method of coping, memorizing phonetically, created his distinctive halting delivery that became synonymous with Dracula. Most debilitating was his severe myopia. Lugosi was legally blind without thick glasses he couldn't wear on camera. His famous hypnotic stare came from straining to focus on faces he could barely see. The combined effect of pain medication and visual impairment made navigating sets treacherous. He frequently injured himself walking into props he couldn't see. Universal Studios exploited rather than accommodated these conditions. Executives recognized that Lugosi's painful movement and intense focus created a uniquely unsettling screen presence that perfectly suited horror roles. Rather than acknowledging his disabilities, they marketed them as brilliant acting choices, leaving Lugosi unable to reveal the true source of his distinctive performance style. The studio's callousness reached its peak during Dracula filming when executives refused to adjust shooting schedules despite Lugosi's obvious suffering. Director Todd Browning finally intervened after finding Lugosi unconscious from pain between scenes, demanding schedule modifications the studio reluctantly granted. The morphine initially prescribed for legitimate pain management eventually led to the addiction that devastated his later career. Yet even as his health deteriorated, Lugosi maintained dignity about his conditions, once telling a young fan who asked about his distinctive walk, "The monsters I play suffer physically. I understand their pain." Number 9. Katharine Hepburn, the trembling queen. Hollywood's aristocratic icon built her career while battling a neurological condition that threatened to destroy it. Hepburn's essential tremor began in her early 30s, progressive neurological trembling that affected her head and hands. Rather than acknowledge this condition, MGM executives accused her of nervousness and unprofessionalism when her hands shook during crucial scenes. Her adaptation was ingenious. Hepburn developed her distinctive speaking style, clipped, rapid delivery with unusual emphasis patterns, specifically to distract from her head tremors. She pioneered the use of pockets in women's costumes to hide hand tremors and created the fashion trend of high necklines and scarves to brace her neck, reducing visible trembling. "Watch any Hepburn film with the sound off," suggested her longtime cinematographer. "You'll see how she's constantly in motion. That wasn't acting choice but necessity. If she kept moving purposefully, the involuntary movements became invisible." Director George Cukor became her greatest ally, developing filming techniques that accommodated her condition while enhancing her performances. He introduced more movement into scenes, used specific camera angles that minimized tremor visibility, and fought with studios to allow longer takes so Hepburn could find her rhythm without constant starts and stops that exacerbated her symptoms. The emotional cost was tremendous. Hepburn's famous independence stemmed partly from necessity. She refused dinner invitations and social events where her tremor might become obvious. Her reputation for being difficult originated from her insistence on specific accommodations she couldn't explain without revealing her condition. "I'm not eccentric," she confided to Spencer Tracy. "I'm strategic. Every choice I make is about controlling what people see." Most painfully, studio executives used her condition as leverage, threatening exposure when she demanded better roles or working conditions. This exploitation contributed to her 5-year absence from Hollywood after being labeled box office poison, a period when her tremor worsened without the stress of concealment. Hepburn's triumph over this condition while building one of Hollywood's most distinguished careers represents an extraordinary feat of adaptation. The very mannerisms audiences came to love, her distinctive speech patterns, elegant neck scarves, and energetic movements, were all strategies to conceal a disability that industry insiders cruelly suggested would make her unemployable. Number 10. Lionel Barrymore, wheelchair breakthrough. The beloved character actor's disability became the first openly acknowledged physical difference in Hollywood, but only after studios had no alternative. Barrymore's severe arthritis began affecting his mobility in the early 1930s, but MGM initially demanded he hide it at all costs. The reality was far worse than publicly acknowledged. Beyond arthritis, Barrymore had broken his hip, which never properly healed due to a bone infection that caused permanent damage. The studio's first solution was devastating. They required him to perform while wearing painful metal braces beneath his clothing that forced his damaged joints to bear weight. These torturous devices caused excruciating pain, but maintained the illusion of normalcy, at least on camera. He would collapse the moment he reached his dressing room, recalled his stand-in. His undergarments were often soaked with blood where the braces had cut into his skin, yet he'd compose himself and return for the next scene without complaint. When his condition deteriorated to the point where even braces couldn't keep him standing, MGM faced a choice: lose one of their most valuable character actors or acknowledge his disability. They reluctantly chose the latter, but with calculated limitations. His wheelchair use would be incorporated into roles, but publicity would attribute it to a specific injury rather than a progressive condition, maintaining the fiction that disability was only acceptable as a temporary state. Even this accommodation came with exploitation. MGM significantly reduced Barrymore's salary upon transitioning him to wheelchair roles, claiming his limited capacity justified lower compensation despite his continuing box box office appeal. When he protested, executives threatened to suspend him without pay, knowing his medical expenses left him financially vulnerable. The psychological impact was complex. While relieved to finally work without hiding his condition, Barrymore struggled with being Hollywood's token disabled performer. Directors often treated him as fragile or incapable, overlooking his extensive classical training in favor of having him play one-dimensional characters defined solely by their wheelchair use. His most famous role as Mr. Potter in It's a Wonderful Life represented both progress and pigeonholing. His disability was visible on screen, but explicitly linked to villainous character traits, reinforcing harmful stereotypes, connecting physical difference with moral corruption. Despite these challenges, Barrymore's visible presence in major films created a crucial precedent. He became the first Hollywood star to openly continue his career with a mobility disability, creating visibility that, while imperfect, challenged the industry's obsession with physical perfection and opened doors that had previously been firmly closed. These 10 stories from Hollywood's golden age reveal not just individual courage, but an entire system built on exploitation of vulnerability. Behind the glamorous facades projected on screens across America existed real people navigating pain, limitation, and psychological trauma, while creating performances that defined American culture. The physical toll was matched only by the emotional one. Imagine living in constant fear that your disability might be exposed. Knowing such exposure could instantly end the career you'd sacrificed everything to build. Imagine performing through excruciating pain while being told your discomfort was insignificant compared to the studio's investment in your image. Imagine watching your distinctive adaptations to disability being praised as artistic choices while you remained silenced about their true origins. What's most remarkable isn't just that these performers achieved success despite their conditions, but that many of cinema's most iconic performance elements, Lugosi's distinctive movement, Dean's reactive timing, Hepburn's speech patterns, originated as disability adaptations. The very techniques audiences came to love often began as necessary accommodations, transforming limitation into innovation that forever changed screen acting. Today, as Hollywood slowly moves toward authentic representation of disability, these stories provide both inspiration and warning. They remind us of the extraordinary resilience of performers who navigated a system designed to exclude them, while demonstrating how far we still must go to create an industry where physical difference is neither hidden nor exploited, but simply accepted as part of human diversity. The next time you watch a classic film, look beyond the perfectly lit faces for hints of the struggles concealed just out of frame. The true magic of these performances lies not in their flawlessness, but in the extraordinary human spirit that transformed pain into art, limitation into innovation, and difference into distinction. If you found this exploration valuable, please subscribe for more content that reveals Hollywood's hidden histories. Which of these stories most surprised you? What other classic film topics would you like us to explore? Share your thoughts in the comments below.